We're taking a live look over at Al-Aqsa Hospital in Gaza as we follow the latest regarding the war between Israel and Hamas. The Associated Press reporting this morning that Israeli forces killed at least 23 Palestinians seeking food on Sunday in the Gaza Strip, according to hospital officials and witnesses who described facing gunfire as hungry crowds surged around aid sites as the malnutrition-related death toll surged. Now, desperation has gripped the Palestinian territory of more than 2 million people, which experts have warned is at the risk of famine because of Israel's blockade and nearly two-year offensive. Now, joining us now to discuss more on what's happening down on the ground is Dr. Asaf Romirowsky. He is the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. Dr. Asaf, good to see you.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So I waited a little bit there, some of the reporting on the latest of what's happened on Sunday. But in your opinion, what is the most concerning aspect right now on the ground in Gaza as this war continues?
Well, let's break it down. There are a bunch of things that are concerned and worth contextualizing within the context of the challenges that we're facing. One, of course, has to do with the military objectives as far as the goal of the IDF as far as the devastation of Hamas. Hamas is basically about I would say 90% devastated, and so that's from the military standpoint, that's a solid objective. The big challenge has been, and this is what we're seeing a lot of the conversation relates to the disentanglement of the civilian population from Hamas as it relates to aid inside of Gaza. The challenge has been, as we've seen over the past few weeks, is that the aid is compromised. Currently the GHF, which is run by us, by the United States, with Israeli security, tends to get hijacked. There's been attacks on it. And the UN agencies that Hamas would like them to use are refusing to deliver the aid. Thereby, Gaza is creating this theater, mainly Hamas is creating this theater of the starvation and the famine and their challenges, whereas Hamas leaders themselves are stealing the aid and manipulating the aid. And so these are creating a lot of the real problems. Interestingly enough, and also worthy of note, yesterday Hamas released a video of one of the hostages who is literally starving, inside of one of the tunnels inside of Gaza, and is forced to dig his own grave. And so you can see the contrast between how the hostages are being treated. No medical attention, no aid, no food whatsoever, where they were, when they were kidnapped around at 10/7, and where they are now, and then the demand for the aid that's going on currently, which is part of the ongoing problem. And this is, of course, all related to, can this war be brought to an end? And that's the overarching question that we're all facing as a result of Witkoff being in the region and the pressure coming in from the Trump administration and the Israelis trying to figure out how they can bring home their hostages.
And we're going to talk about U.S. Special Envoy Witkoff in the Middle East in just a second. But before I do that, I want to put up some of this footage that we have from earlier today because it's quite impressive. These images, you can see the aid there being dropped off by some of the planes over in the Gaza Strip. Dr. Asaf, could you please explain to our viewers here kind of how this works when it comes to coordinating perhaps the exact points where this aid is supposed to fall?
So the IDF, to its credit, has done a good job about this. I mean, let's put it into military context. Israel is fighting urban warfare. What they've created, and this is what they've been doing since the war has begun, they created safe zones and they've created areas of humanitarian corridors. All of this aid that you're seeing dropped now into Gaza is being pinpointed into those areas. They've been, the IDF that is, sending messages, sending leaflets, sending notices as to where to move the population to create those humanitarian areas for aid delivery and aid distribution. The problem, as I said, the compromising of the aid by entities that have been complicit with Hamas, that is UN entities, namely groups like UNRWA, which we have a bunch of evidence that they were involved in 10/7. They're the ones who are refusing to do the job with the idea of creating this narrative. That being said, nobody wants anybody to starve. I mean, and I think that that's been a concern that come out of Israel and of the United States and everybody else looking at the situation. And so they are creating these areas where aid can come in. The biggest challenge, of course, has to do, even though aid is being airdropped into the area, is the distribution of the aid. Who is doing that distribution? And that is an ongoing problem that Israel is trying to negotiate.
Some of those aid distribution sites is where we saw earlier this week U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, also the U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Dr. Asaf, what came out of their visit?
So Witkoff, to his credit, has met with the hostage families. He was in Doha. He came back. At this point, where there's been a lot of frustration on both sides of of trying to move this process along. First, they were talking about phases as far as the last 50 hostages that are still in Gaza, dead and alive, as far as a phased release. At this point, they're talking about an all-inclusive deal. We're trying to move that along. Again, Israel at this point, as a result of what they're seeing, and let's also make it clear here, the existence of the hostages is the number one lifeline that Hamas has, their insurance card to keep them in business. If there are no hostages, there's nothing to prevent Israel from continuing the military objectives of the war itself. There is mounting pressure to release, to move this along. And I think most in Israeli society are willing to do what they need to do to end the war if the hostages were to come home. And that's really the game that's being played out here. And the evidence that we have, we know that every day passing by is literally a risk to those hostages' lives. And that's the unfortunate tragic reality that you're seeing here when you're seeing these images come out, and the psychological warfare that is being waged on the state of Israel. Furthermore, I would say you've seen now of late several European countries who are trying to put pressure on the Israelis by saying they are going to inaugurate a Palestinian state or recognize one at the General Assembly in September, the French and the Brits. Again, that is rewarding Hamas for their actions. And I think that there has to be also a clear understanding of who the powers are, what exactly is on the ground. Hamas is not your answer to any of this, and that is all a mechanism of deflection to the actual reality that you're seeing in the ground itself.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that goes toward my next question, which is several of these Western countries, they are seeking to recognize a Palestinian state. What we have the UK, we have France, and they're planning to make that announcement there in September. However, President Trump earlier this week saying that he does not agree with that approach because, as you just said, it would be rewarding Hamas for their terroristic efforts down there in the Gaza Strip. But really, how significant of a movement is that for these Western countries to move ahead with recognizing a Palestinian state?
It's mostly cosmetic. I mean, let's be honest about this whole, situation itself. Who is the governing power that's going to govern Palestinian Authority? Hamas is not the answer. Hamas is an Islamist terrorist jihadi organization that has been using and abusing the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Authority really is weak, run by an octogenarian Mahmoud Abbas, who has been serving now almost 20 years in a 4-year term. So there's been no free and open elections within the Gaza Strip. And that's really the ultimate question about who is the power that is going to govern Palestinian society. All you're doing is creating another failed state situation, absent any power that's going to actually work to administer the needs of the Palestinian people. And that's been the challenge. The fact that the French and the Brits, who are going to announce a Palestinian state, look, historically speaking, go back to Sykes-Picot back in 1916 when the British and the French tried to parse out the Middle East. That didn't work out so well. And so these are nice kind of platitudes that are being made internationally. I would also attribute that these comments are also coming in from the amount of the Muslim population inside these European areas, namely the French and the UK, who are putting pressure. And what it does is really deflect from the actual reality on the ground, as I said before. and ignores the fact that Israel has gone through a modern day Holocaust. People are forgetting who actually started this war. And the idea that you're going to create a state as a response to that without actually doing the work to create one. Let's not forget that even prior to 10/7, the Palestinian Authority and the Palestinian at large have refused to have any conversation with Israel at large. So the idea that you're going to like automatically decide here's a state and automatically everything will fall into place, to my mind, is ludicrous.
I want to take a live look here out of Jerusalem over in Israel. And Dr. Asaf, as you just mentioned, so there's a lot of talk right now as to who is going to potentially be governing this territory when this war does end. Earlier this week, we also saw that the United Nations, they hosted a discussion to talk about the two-state solution for Palestine. I think it's worth kind of refreshing, providing a refresher on this idea. What is that exactly when we say a two-state solution? And I also just want to make a note that representatives from the U.S. and Israel were not there for that discussion.
100%. So it's a good question. It's worthy of contextualizing this. Historically, there's been a huge debate. If you go back to the 90s, during the Oslo Peace Accords, there was a conversation about what a two-state solution would look like, which would include Gaza and areas of the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria as a contiguous Palestinian state within a state that would allow Palestinian sovereignty to take place. Gaza at this point is off the map. Really, I would say that at best, you're looking at three entities. Gazans and West Bankers really don't interact. There's no intermarriage between these two parts of Palestinian society. Gazans are indeed Egyptians. West Bankers are indeed are Jordanians. And so the idea that you're going to try to manufacture a contiguous area within that geopolitical narrative is also problematic to begin with. I would argue that potentially, again, there have been many proposals and suggestions of trying to create an enclave within the area of the West Bank that would be governed by the Palestinian Authority, which is what is happening, tacitly now by the Palestinian Authority within those Palestinian areas. Again, Hamas is not an answer to any of this. Hamas does not recognize the state of Israel, does not recognize the United States for that matter, and the ideology for that matter, while they are indeed religious in their and theological in their narrative and their orthodoxy of their Islamist viewpoint, the Palestinian Authority is not much different. I think that there has to be another question here, which is also, needs to be brought up. Where is the Arab world as far as partnerships that are going to be investing in this enterprise? That meeting that you mentioned, there was Saudi involvement, there were Egyptian involvement. If there's not going to be more than actual, beyond the statements themselves, actual active investment and monies and support and attempts to govern and to recreate, Gaza needs to be rebuilt, needs to be reconstructed. The entire architecture needs to be reconstituted, not to mention Palestinian leadership, as I alluded to before. Again, Mahmoud Abbas is in his 80s. There has to be a new generation of leaders. All of this, there's no magic bullet to make this happen. And because the Palestinians have refused to have actual direct negotiations, and the idea that the United Nations is miraculously going to parachute a Palestinian state somehow, and thereby it's automatically all going to fall into place, is detached from reality. That's not how these things take place. And I think that we need to be aware of that, despite the fact that these are nice, may sound the right way to do things. It's more a fantasy than a reality.
Dr. Asaf Romirowsky, we appreciate your time here, the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. And of course, we're going to continue to follow all of these developments. So we'll be checking in soon.
Thank you as always.
Of course.